It's been an unbelievable 15 long years in between Tron films. Tron Legacy came out in 2010. The latest installment, Tron Ares, has just hit theaters. But is it worth the wait and all the hype? Keep listening to find out. Good evening, you're listening to The True Tank and I'm your host, The Tank. If this is your first time listening to The True Tank, a big welcome. If you're a repeat listener, welcome back. Just before we get into the film review, I've got some very exciting news. The True Tank merch store should be open by the time you're hearing this. I've got a kind of like a prototype store set up where you can purchase some wearable truth. I've got a few launch designs. I've got about, I think, 5 to 8 different designs, basically logo, nothing ultra fancy, just testing the waters and seeing if it's worth opening a dedicated store. The official True Tank merch store will be on Etsy and most likely eBay. And if things go well, I'll probably open a standalone store where you can buy direct from the site. I just thought Etsy and eBay is probably a good way to test the water. Safer too, if people aren't comfortable going to a website they don't really know, or one of the free stores you get on a lot of the print-on-demand services. You have the financial backing of eBay and Etsy. And if you're already a member there, then you don't have to sign up for anything. You can just purchase. You can purchase direct from the store. The order gets sent through to Printful, where they make and ship your order. I've ordered some samples. The quality is pretty good. The focus of the first line of merchandise is just big, bold logos, getting the name out there. And then in the future, I'll be adding more designs, a few more different logo-based designs, maybe a bit more artworks, things like that. It's still early on, so I'm still testing the waters. But that's very exciting news. I've been talking about it for, feels like forever, for about fucking 2 years now, so it's finally happening. There hasn't been a new episode of Live Communism out in a little while. I've been backlogged editing episodes I had bulk recorded, so that explains why you haven't heard any new Live Communism episodes, but there are a few in the works. 3's been recorded and it's just waiting to be edited. That should probably be the next one after this. I'm having to re-edit another episode, and if you haven't listened to Bioweapons Part 4, what the fuck are you waiting for? Because Part 5 is in development. And going into 2026, I've already got probably 3 episodes already written up. It's going to be a big year for the Truth Tank. 6 is my lucky number, 2026. So expect more merch, more episodes, and more tank. So in tonight's episode, we're going to be having a look at the latest installment in the Tron franchise. It's been an unbelievable 15-year wait, which in my opinion is just too fucking long in between Tron films. Tron Legacy came out in 2010. I saw that film in the cinema, I think on the second day, and was absolutely blown away by it. It was probably at the time one of the first, probably not fully digital, but mostly CGI digital film, besides the Star Wars prequels and a couple of other huge big sci-fi films. But Tron Legacy really pushed the bounds of technology quite far. This is about a year after Avatar, so motion capture had been tested and was being refined, and I think this is one of the first films that really took motion capture to the next level in the de-aged Jeff Bridges. It wasn't perfect, as the early generation stuff was kind of a bit iffy. The mouth didn't move properly. The face looked alright, but it looked a little too video gamey. Mouth didn't move properly when a character would talk. But it was pretty fucking good for 2010. I actually thought it was 2011 that film came out, so it's a fair while ago. So 15 years is a massive long wait in between Tron films. I think the first one came out in like 1982, and it was decades until Legacy arrived, and now fast forward 15 years and we have Tron Ares. So is Tron Ares worth the wait? Has it been worth the 15 years? All the hype and anticipation is finally over. The film is out. It's the first film I've seen in a long time, since Superman back in July, which I think is one of the longer breaks in between cinema experiences I've had in a very long time. When I saw the film, there was only one other person there, so I pretty much had the whole entire theatre to myself, and it was the big theatre where they put all the big action films. I also saw the trailer for Avatar Fire and Ash, which I haven't seen in the cinema yet. I've stayed away from trailers. I haven't really tried. I've seen the teaser trailer of Fire and Ash, but I haven't really wanted to see the theatrical one. I just think they give too much away in trailers now. I'd like to be surprised when I go to the theatre. I only think I ever saw maybe one theatrical trailer of Tron Ares. But it was really nice going to the movies again. It was relaxing. It's just what I needed. Before I keep rambling about the theatre experience, let's get into tonight's show. This is episode 87 of the Truth Tank, Tron Ares film review. So tonight's episode is a movie review. The movie in question is Tron Ares. There'll also be a second part of this episode, more of like a subsection that has nothing really to do with the film. It's going to be an in-depth discussion on artificial intelligence, consciousness, learning, creativity, rhythm, the origins of art, and the human spark. It's going to be a in-depth philosophical debate on artificial intelligence and humankind's origins, which came about while I was talking to ChatGPT. I've only been using it for a couple of weeks. I'm treating it like a research assistant. I don't want to become too over-reliant on it. It's very good for episode descriptions and titles, obviously. While I was drafting up the Tron Ares script for this show, I was thinking about certain scenes from the film and some of the themes and ideas that they were talking about, and I started asking AI questions based on some of the things that were in the film, and that kind of led me down this gigantic rabbit hole where I had this in-depth philosophical discussion with ChatGPT. And I turned it into a standalone podcast episode, which will kind of connect back to here because some of the themes are discussed in Tron, and it obviously relates to our artificial intelligence, which Tron Ares does. It's pretty much the backbone of the story. That should be out in a week or two. At the time of recording, I haven't recorded that one yet. I'm going to get the film review out of the way, and then do that one separately, so it's not a 3.5 hour long podcast. But I digress. So Tron Ares is directed by Joachim Roning, however you pronounce his name. It stars Jared Leto, Greta Lee, Evan Peters, Gillian Anderson, Jodie Turner-Smith, and Jeff Bridges. The film picks up 15 years after Tron Legacy. And I'll say it again, it's fucking hard to believe it's been 15 years since Legacy. The film centers around this mysterious program named Ares, who eventually, like all good AI stories, eventually starts to question reality and consciousness and what his place is in this world. Well, in the dual digital and real world. The film blends a lot of high-stakes action, some pretty impressive visual effects, a killer soundtrack by Nine Inch Nails, which we'll get into a little later. And surprisingly, it is also pretty philosophical. There's a lot of philosophical themes which examine what it means to be real, unchecked power of tech corporations, and the intersection of humanity and artificial intelligence into the real world. And of course, there's a nostalgic cameo by Jeff Bridges, because you can't have a Tron film without Jeff Bridges, which does a really good job of connecting all three films in a coherent timeline, because Tron Ares doesn't have a lot to do with Tron Legacy. They're not exactly a direct sequel to each other, much the same way a Legacy and the original Tron were sequels, but separated by about 35 years, 40 years or something like that. and a lot had changed. There's multiple generations that had no clue what Tron was, because it's not the easiest film to find until Disney brought 20th Century Fox. I remember buying it on Blu-ray before that happened, and then I think that was like the 30-something anniversary. It had been digitally remastered. I mean, it was a older kind of cheap film for the day, but it was also state of the art when it came out. It was ahead of its time. But unfortunately, Disney doesn't do physical media in the Southern Hemisphere, so copies of that have dried up. I actually do regret selling my copy. I wasn't the biggest fan of the original. I mean, I liked the themes and the concepts. It was just very dated by the time I had seen it. And then Legacy came out, and it was just this vibrant neon blue world. And Legacy does a good job of connecting the dots and the threads in between all three films, but at the same time, it is a bit of a standalone sequel. And it takes place more in the real world than it does in the grid, which Tron Legacy is pretty much all in the grid, apart from really the start and the end, much like the original Tron. The Tron universe is definitely an interesting one. I think it's one that's been very underutilized, and it's probably not going to be like as big as Star Wars or Star Trek or any of the juggernaut sci-fi franchises, but it is a very interesting one nonetheless. And I think with the addition of Jared Leto into the Tron franchise, there could be a real chance to create something really special with these characters and push the Tron franchise further into the future. Jared Leto is fantastic. He delivers a very compelling performance as the enigmatic and very interesting artificial intelligence program named Ares. And just before we go too far ahead, there will be some spoilers in this episode. I'm not going to go into a massive deep dive into the film like I have previously done, but there will be a couple of spoilers here and there. So 15 years have passed since the events of Tron Legacy. The grid has evolved, but so has the danger lurking within it. Computer programs aren't just lines of digital code anymore. They are physical manifestations as well. So Ares is a soldier born inside the system, the grid. He's created by Julian Dillinger, played by Evan Peters. He's the grandson of the guy in the first one, can't remember his name, and he's inherited his grandfather's computer tech company. So Ares is a program designed to obey, but he's expendable, which Dillinger likes to tell Ares every chance he gets. But like all good things, you can only push a program so far. Ares eventually wakes up to what is going on and becomes self-aware, which causes him to question his reality, his purpose, and his identity. Tron Ares drops us straight back into the neon-drenched world of Tron, but it's Tron done a little differently. And the new era of Tron kicks off with more or less two warring big tech company CEOs. The two big companies in the film are Encom and Dillinger Systems. Dillinger Systems is obviously run by Julian Dillinger, and Encom has been bought and taken over by Eve Kim, who is the company's CEO after Sam Flynn disappears. So Eve Kim and her partner are chasing a breakthrough in computing science. They're hidden in a remote Alaskan station somewhere, where they discover the permanence code, which is a way to make a digital construct persist beyond the grid. More or less, the code takes a digital program and transports it into the real world, where it can last for more than half an hour before falling to pieces, which is a big problem that both these companies have had. Both companies are chasing the same thing. They both want the permanence codes, so they can both win the AI race. Dillinger Systems is pursuing some big military contracts where it can literally print soldiers and vehicles for search and rescue or for war, which is a very interesting concept too. It did make me think, what if like in 10 years time this is what the future of warfare looks like, where you can literally print an army in a couple of minutes, or you can print bombs. The permanence code is mysterious. It has eluded both CEOs. It's developed by Flynn and is hidden in his work, which obviously Eve Kim has inherited when she took over the running of Encom. But Kim discovers the permanence code and she creates a orange tree out of a 3D printer and more or less births this digital orange tree into the real world. And this kind of sets up the film. If she can make this orange tree last more than this 29 minutes, what could Dillinger potentially do with it, considering he has this AI army? So when we first meet Ares in the film, he's basically an attack dog for Dillinger Systems. He's like an AI security program. He does what he's told. But he does have this awakening and starts to question his creator, that maybe what he's doing isn't really, quote-unquote, the right thing. I did like the naming of the security programs. There's Ares, Athena. They're all named after Greek gods, which is very fitting. Because Dillinger starts off as kind of the nerdy tech company wanker CEO. He's a bit of a cunt. He is kind of over the top. It's all about him. He will stop at nothing to try to get this source code, including hacking Encom's servers in order to get all the information on what they're working on. He definitely does blur the line between competitive businessman and being a complete sociopath. He will literally stop at nothing to get what he wants if it means his company is going to come out on top. And he uses Ares to do that. And that's where the problem arises with Dillinger, is he's willing to use the AI programs to do his dirty work in the digital world and in the real world. As I mentioned about the military contracts he has, there's a scene where there's a bunch of investors around, including a lot of military generals and Defense Department people, where he's testing, making the soldiers and vehicles out of a 3D printer. There's the big laser that makes them all in front of everybody. Pretty cool. I wouldn't be surprised if that could happen in 20 years, but it does also bring up the question, how do they do it? Because making something from a 3D printer is one thing, but making something that can walk and talk and a vehicle that can move around and power itself is a completely different thing. Which makes you wonder, how does the code come out of the digital world and then be printed in the flesh? I got the impression when they print the orange tree that it was like a fake plastic tree, but it's a real tree that produces real oranges, which was the thing I didn't really get. I'm like, well, how the fuck do they code a fucking orange tree out of the digital world and it makes a tree made out of wood leaves and produces fruit? And this scene highlights that, with this fine line between man and machine, code and flesh. How does one transfer from the digital world into the real world? The film also takes a philosophical look at AI. Is it good? Is it bad? Can it be both? Is the issue of quote-unquote AI being evil, or is it the programmer who programs it to be evil, like Dillinger using Ares to do his dirty work and attack a server farm digitally, which is a fucking cool scene, by the way. Because Ares, when he does become awakened and he starts to work out what's going on, he does question why he's doing this. So in a sense, he kind of reluctantly takes the orders of his master or his creator. But on the other hand, that's what he was created to do. He's the head of the security program, and that is his job, is to seek out and destroy threats to the grid and to his creator. And this film, like Legacy, has its own unique colour scheme. Red is the colour of Ares, and I think it's a pretty fitting colour too. God of War, black and red, I think that fits pretty well. Legacy was blue. And this time around, the grid is more red. It definitely has more of a militaristic, kind of an evil vibe to it. The grid from Legacy was blue and a lot more light. It looks more like a cross between Mordor and Mustafar than it does the grid from Tron Legacy. Jumping out of the film for a sec, when I first heard about Tron Ares and that Disney was going to make another Tron film, I was half excited, half apprehensive. Obviously, because Disney's name's attached to it, I'm apprehensive of anything Disney does. But at the same time, I thought, yeah, another Tron film would be cool. It's well overdue, as I've said multiple times already. But it was definitely a world that I did want to go back to. It was very unique. It's a colourful, neon, digital world. And as I mentioned, I didn't really watch too many trailers. I've seen the ads on TV and one theatrical trailer. And I honestly didn't really know what to expect. Like most movies today, trailers make the film out to be one thing, very flashy and over the top, and they show you all the action and the spectacle and all that. But I was surprised that Tron Ares was a much more personal and deeper film than I had imagined. And going back to Legacy for a sec, Legacy is a big, grand sci-fi action film. It has a lot of very cool themes and concepts in it, but it's a bit more inclined to be a big action spectacle film, where Ares, I think, dials back the action and is a bit more personal. But obviously there's that human personal story in all of them, with the son of Flynn trying to find his father and find out what happened to him. In this one, the Encom CEO, her sister, who was also her business partner, dies of a rare form of cancer. The sister was the techie brains behind a lot of the technology. So she's trying to pick up her sister's work, and there's a very personal connection with the sisters. Dillinger has his mother, who's very skeptical of the path he's going down and some of the decisions he's making. She's more of the moral voice to his over-the-top sociopathic behavior. So you have these two CEOs with these vastly different personal connections with family, which I wasn't really expecting with this film, because I knew Gillian Anderson was in it, and obviously I love Gillian Anderson, being a big X-Files fan. She can play anything. But what I'd seen in the behind-the-scenes footage and limited trailers and stuff I saw and cast interviews, they didn't really give a hell of a lot away about her character or her role in it. I was very surprised that she's this moral voice of reason to Evan Peters' complete over-the-top CEO sociopathic wanker. So I was very surprised at the personal family story in this, because if you just watch one of the trailers, it just looks like it's a bunch of action scenes with black and red clad characters driving light cycles down the street. And that story, the personal story in this, really does drive the film, and it also leads to some pretty big events in the film and some characters going through some pretty big changes. And going back to Legacy does have that personal story with Sam Flynn trying to find his father. It's not quite as personal. I guess it's the story of a boy trying to find his father in this weird, colourful digital world. But there's also a lot of spectacular visuals that you kind of get distracted by, and that incredible soundtrack by Daft Punk, which I think is one of the best modern film soundtracks. I brought that soundtrack and played it in my car fucking every day for like a year. The thing I also liked about Legacy was you had that computer program, was it Cora, played by Olivia Wilde, where she's that kind of naive program who is fascinated by Sam Flynn and the quote-unquote real world. She's kind of like a reverse Pinocchio. She wants to be a real girl. And her curiosity was one of the unique things about that film. Because she's a cool character, and she was the perfect companion character for Sam Flynn, being dropped into this world that he basically knows nothing about. So yes, there is the personal aspect to Tron Legacy as well, but the way it's done in Tron Ares was a lot more surprising. I wasn't expecting this at all, and it's a part of the story I actually really enjoyed. So much of it is focused on the digital and tech side of things and artificial intelligence, and dealing with these programs like Ares and Athena that are very cold and emotionless binary programs / characters. It was really cool to have the personal human side anchored in the middle of the story, because it really does drive the whole film from start to finish, especially with Kim's story. Evan Peters' character Dillinger, same thing. He has this kind of other, more friction-based relationship with his mother, And obviously Kim is driven by the memory of her sister and holding up her legacy, where Dillinger's mum is always reprimanding him for his behaviour and going out of his lane and crossing some pretty big lines that he really shouldn't have. And spoiler warning, stick around in the credits because there is a very cool post-credit scene. So let's look at the cinematic side of the Tron universe. The visuals, the performance, and the overarching story. So the grid has evolved. The colour scheme is red, unlike Legacy's blue. It's a very hostile looking grid from where we last saw it 15 years ago. It definitely has a militaristic vibe to it. There's a lot more of the guard security programs around. You don't see the programs in the white or the black, like the civilian looking programs from Tron Legacy. It's very much like a military state now, which is more or less what Dillinger has done to the grid after his company takes over from where his grandfather left off. I didn't see the film in IMAX either. I'm a bit on the fence with IMAX. I don't think you need every fucking action film made this year to be in IMAX. I think you can still enjoy it just by seeing it normally, and where I am there's like one IMAX theatre, and it's not even IMAX, it's called XMAX. Used to be a IMAX theatre years ago, but I think they lost the license or it shut down. So I imagine the grid would have looked even more spectacular on a 3-story high screen. Now that I think of it, I remember seeing Tron Legacy in 3D. That was the big gimmick with that film, and 15 years later it's IMAX. Which is funny now that I think about it, because back in the day, 2009, 2010 to like 15 to, I don't know, 2018, 3D was the big gimmick for theatres and for the cinematic experience. Every fucking movie was in 3D. Every Marvel movie was 3D, and they had a lot of unnecessary films that just try to get more money by claiming it was in 3D, and really, like, most of them sucked. Avatar was the best. That was I think still today, probably the best 3D film that I've seen. The Hobbit was unnecessary. That high frame rate 3D in 2012 kind of pushed the 3D experience to the next level, but I didn't really like the look of it. I didn't think Avatar 2 looked that good in 3D. There was moments where I had to take my glasses off to check I was actually still watching a 3D film. I thought Avatar looked much better than The Way of Water. It was slower and it had that kind of shine that made it look more sci-fi, but apparently, according to James Cameron, that the high frame rate was the way to go because you could process the image quicker or something like that. Anyway, Tron Ares utilizes the IMAX experience. There's a lot of films that have done that in the last 2 years. Dune Part 2 was IMAX, which was worth it because that film is epic. I'm still working on that multi-part episode for June and June 2 reviews. F1 was in IMAX. Yeah, you could make the argument that with the cars and stuff like that and having all those cool camera angles and tricks, that would have been really cool to see on a giant screen, but I saw it in just normal and it was a fucking great film. If I had the chance of seeing it in IMAX, yeah, I probably would have. Like I said, it's this bold visual digital world. It would have probably looked really cool in IMAX. And going back to Tron Legacy was pretty good in 3D. That was still at a time where 3D films were good. It was just up a year after Avatar, so it was the old Real D 3D. It wasn't the high frame rate. That looked really cool, just all the blues and the neons. It really suited that world. I'm pretty sure I brought the combo pack 2D, 3D Blu-ray. I even paid more for it years and years ago in case I ever got a 3D TV, and they've pretty much gone the way of the dodo. And maybe Tron Ares was also in 3D or 4D, whatever they fucking call it now. I think that the new Predator Badlands film is going to be in 3 and 4D. With Ares, there's a more of a sense of depth that makes it feel like a much older grid, because obviously Legacy was the first time we've seen it in 30-something years, and it was completely different to the original Tron. And Tron Ares kind of takes that to the next level, but the grid looks like it's a city surrounded by mountains, digital mountains. Like I said, it's more Mordor, Mustafar looking than the grid from Tron Legacy. And it definitely has this feel that it's been there for a long time, and it's continued to grow and evolve over the past 15 years under Dillinger Industries. It's been added to and refined. And the colour scheme too. Ares is red and black. Obviously, God of War, it's a fitting colour, and it also helps distinguish the two films. It gives them their own identities. One of the most visually striking scenes in the film was the attack on the server farm, where Ares and the other programs attack Encom security. There's a big battle between the two different security programs. Encom's a very peaceful looking blue world, and they get attacked by the black and red security forces of Dillinger Systems, Dillinger Industries. Another visually striking scene was the light cycle chase down the middle of the street with the black and the red light wall beam thing coming out behind it, cutting the cop cars in half. That was really fucking cool. Very cinematic. Completely different too, because a lot of the action in Ares takes place out of the grid, as opposed to Legacy, where pretty much all the action is exclusively in the grid. A lot of Tron Ares takes place outside of the digital world, in the real world, which also gives it a very distinctive feel and flavour compared to the other two films. I also think 7 to 10 years ago, this film would have been much harder to make. I mean, Legacy pushed the boundaries of what was possible digitally. It really pushed the envelope to the point of breaking. While Ares doesn't have as many completely digital scenes as Tron Legacy, or maybe it does, it didn't appear that it's as digital, quote unquote. The scenes that do take place in the grid and the completely digital scenes are incredible. The visual effects are amazing, and you can really tell there's just been this massive evolution in visual effects and digital cinema. The fights are a lot smoother this time around, with the Xena warrior princess circular throwy things they have, and the light battens, the weapons are a lot more alive. The fights are, like I said, really, really smooth. Everything feels textured and like it's fresh from the 3D printer. Everything, the costumes and the suits look a lot more realistic. They have a bit more depth and feel to them. Legacy, all those years ago, was really pushing what was possible digitally. And this is at a time where digital cameras were becoming more mainstream in filmmaking. Ares, I'll assume, was shot on film on IMAX, because it says shot on IMAX, or I don't know if it was shot on IMAX, but if it's in IMAX, there's a good chance that it probably was shot using IMAX cameras for some scenes. Maybe the whole film wasn't shot on IMAX, but definitely parts of it were. Which is interesting, because it's a film that is so heavily technology based, and it's using what is a pretty old technology now, because IMAX has been around since I was in primary school. So it's a long time ago. It's definitely, it'd be nearly probably 30 years old, and it's only now that it's being utilised in cinema. Well, Christopher Nolan has a lot to do with that, because he's really probably the first big director that used it in an action film in The Dark Knight. And that was only for key action scenes, but it was definitely noticeable. And now, like with the Odyssey coming out next year, that's going to be shot entirely in IMAX. That's kind of taking things to the next level again. He used IMAX in Oppenheimer, which, who would make a 3-hour documentary about a scientist and think to shoot half of it in black and white and the other half in IMAX. It's hard to tell what parts of Ares are shot in IMAX or digital, if that is the case, but the results are the same. It's a visually striking film. The fights are smooth, everything feels textured and like it's fresh from the 3D printer. There's a big chase scene through the grid, which is another visual standout moment. One of my favourite scenes is where Ares becomes self-aware and conscious. There's lots of red and black and some really striking visuals. His office kind of overlooks the grid, so he's always looking out onto this digital frontier. But he's kind of confined to this little box until he's ordered to attack by Dillinger. The Recognizer battle too is really cool. So are the light cycle chases and pretty much all the scenes in the grid. We've looked at the digital side of it, so let's have a look at the performances, the humans that made the characters and these digital programs come to life. So by far the biggest standout in this film was Jared Leto as Ares. I actually believed he was a computer program. There's this eerie yet charismatic energy about him. Every gesture feels calculated and programmed, but somehow has a deeply human trait about it. I did notice early on in the film that he doesn't blink a hell of a lot. There's some scenes where Ares doesn't blink at all that I noticed. There's a scene where he's talking to Kim in the car where he's asking a lot of questions. I noticed he blinks when he asks questions, but when he's scanning a potential threat, he doesn't. He has this kind of psychotic stare. But when he's curious and he's not in defensive attack mode, he blinks. But it's not random blinking. It looks like it's very controlled blinking, like, I don't know, he's like accessing a file in his head or something. So there's all those little mannerisms that Leto does that really make Ares feel alive, but at the same time feel like he is this artificial being, a computer program. And Jared Leto is a method actor. He's notorious for doing a lot of weird things on set, like bringing dead pigs and butcher's knives to the set of Suicide Squad. I mean, like I said, but on the Superman special I did a couple of months ago, he could have been a really great Joker if the writing and directing was better and he was less ghetto, but he still does a very good performance as a psychotic clown. It's just unfortunate he seems to be cast in the wrong cinematic version of Batman. He would have been a great Matt Reeves Joker. I also noticed the other security program, Athena, doesn't blink much either. They have this creepy stare pretty much most of the film. There's a scene where Ares scans Kim, where he has this different look. He's less threatening. He has more of this curious look. He's scanning for empathy, or that she's empathetic to him, which triggers him to start questioning consciousness and his reality. The scenes with the raindrops and the fireflies, where he has this childlike wonderment, is also a really key scene and shows just how brilliant an actor Jared Leto is, because that guy is fucking great in everything. He's great in the Dallas Buyers Club. That movie he did with Denzel Washington and Rami Malek, where he's playing the psycho he's the murder suspect. Rami Malek is convinced that he was the one that killed this woman because he's always at the crime scenes. He's fucking creepy as shit in that film. He looks like a guy, like if you saw him coming towards you, you would cross the street. And he keeps you guessing right till the end of that film. I won't give it away. Like going back years and years and years ago, the first films I saw Jared Leto in were Fight Club and Alexander. He's fucking great in Fight Club. Alexander too. Those films really made me pay attention to him. He can do everything. I've seen at a Soundwave like fucking 12 years ago. I saw some of 30 Seconds to Mars. I got one of their albums. I only saw about a quarter of the 30 Seconds to Mars set, but it was pretty fucking good. Like he was. I mean, he's not, you know, like the greatest guitar player ever, but he was pretty fucking decent. He's a great singer. He put a lot of energy into it. He put as much energy into being in a band as he does acting. I think there was another band I was wanting to see at the same time. I think Rob Zombie was on. So I was, 30 Seconds to Mars or Rob Zombie, kind of a no-brainer. So he's a multi-talented artist. He sings, he writes music, he plays guitar, he can act, he produces. He's a quadruple threat. Other notable performances are the cameo we get from Jeff Bridges, and that's been teased in the trailers, so it's not really a big spoiler. That's just pure nostalgia, and it's a huge wink to Tron fans. It's also a really key scene because it does have this emotional impact to it. It's also the point in the film that connects all three films together and fills in a lot of the blanks and perfectly sets up the third act. All the performances are pretty good. Gillian Anderson is great as always. Evan Peters too does a great job as the unhinged CEO. Jodie Turner-Smith, who plays Athena, I'm pretty sure, once again, very convincing that she's a computer program, a security program. Greta Lee was great. But the one who steals the show is unsurprisingly Jared Leto. He, like I said, he's great in everything. He's completely believable as a computer program. You don't think this guy's a human at any point during the film. He just does such a fucking great job of convincing the audience that he is a security program. His whole look too is really interesting with the long hair and the beard. He kind of looks like an ancient Greek warrior that's been digitalized. So the pacing and the story of this film are also really good, and as I said before, it feels more intimate and less grand than Legacy's bright blue, digitally evolved and reimagined grid. Ares unfolds more slowly. There are longer gaps in between the action, which I think is a positive because it lets you think about these ideas, because there's a lot of philosophical anecdotes and themes in this film. So the fact that there is longer gaps in between the action does let you think about these films while the film is progressing. It does let you wrap your mind around, could this be possible in a couple of years? How does this work? There's a lot more room to breathe. The themes are also very current with the AI revolution and parallel some of the concerns around the future of artificial intelligence, which has been all over the media in recent years. It's also the first Tron film to have a majority of the film take place outside of the grid. Ares takes place probably about half in, half out of the grid. I think more so in the real world as opposed to the grid, which I think definitely works for this film because it was very cool having Ares and the security programs contained in the computer, but then they get unleashed in the real world to cause chaos and basically be an attack dog for Dillinger. So that was very cool, because when they come out in the real world, you think, oh fuck, like there's nothing that can really stop them. They're basically these like super soldiers riding around the city in light cycles, and nothing can really stop them. But one thing Tron Ares does really well is the pacing. This film is paced perfectly. The pacing works. It doesn't get bogged down in too many themes or too many philosophical ideas. It gives you just enough to be contemporary and add a very intelligent undertone to the flashy lights and the action scenes. But it doesn't go too far down the rabbit hole and become either boring, pretentious, or make you think too much that it takes you out of the action. And having the film broken up between the grid and the real world definitely assists the pacing. They're two very different visual worlds. You have the bright red of the grid and the green and grey of the real world. That pacing definitely helps give the grid and the real world their own time to shine, rather than just quickly cutting back and forth between digital world, real world. Gives you more time to breathe and work out the film and become very sympathetic to these characters. But having said that, I also did like the adrenalized, bright digital world of Legacy. That also worked as well, especially the big nightclub scene fight and all the the chases and stuff that happened in that film. I should really watch Tron Legacy again. But both films are very different. One's building a more personal story, taking place in two separate yet simultaneous worlds, where the other was more of a big pushing the envelope digital film. Very bright, very over the top, very futuristic. Both are part of the same franchise and both work. And speaking of continuity, let's talk about how Ares ties back to the Tron universe as we know it. While Ares isn't a typical sequel to Legacy, there are a lot of connections and Easter eggs back to Legacy and to the original Tron film. There's a couple of Easter eggs that happen later in the film that are very key to tying back to Legacy and the future of the Tron universe and where the series might go in the future. Hopefully we get more Tron films, and hopefully we don't have to wait 15 years for Tron 4. In the scene where Dillinger is demonstrating the power of his AI army to the investors and to the military generals and the defense staff and all the billionaires that he wants to invest in his company, there are a couple of real-life millionaire and billionaire cameos, one of which being Gary Vee. I thought, was that Gary Vee or just someone who looked like him? And then you see a couple more shots and he has a line or two. I'm like, oh, fuck, that is Gary Vee. I didn't know he was in the film. That was a nice little surprise. There's a few other real-life billionaires in there as well, but I'm not 100% sure. There are some other less subtle Easter eggs, one of which being the old Flynn building from Tron Legacy and Tron, the old computers, the pinball machine in video games, and probably one of the coolest Easter eggs. This is a bit of a spoiler, so if you don't want to hear it, you have been warned. The coolest Easter egg is when Ares goes to see Flynn and we get the Jeff Bridges cameo. We go back to the original grid in the old yellow light cycle, and it is like the original Tron from 1982, which I thought was nostalgic, retro, and really fucking cool. I wasn't born when the original Tron came out. I've seen it on Blu-ray. So getting a little taste of what the Tron cinematic experience would have looked like was pretty fucking cool. It was also like stepping into sci-fi history. You could really imagine what it would have been like to see Tron back in the cinema in the 80s. But one of the biggest surprises about Tron Ares is I thought the military application story arc was going to be like the main backbone of the story. And going back to what I was saying about the trailers, the trailer made it out to be like that was going to be a huge part of the film, and it's not, and it was really fucking cool, because I thought this film was going to focus on AI soldiers and fucking weapons, and this Dillinger guy was making shit for the military, or he's going to make his own army or something like that, and that wasn't the case. It was a much more personalized and intimate story that takes place in this grand science fiction world. Yeah, so I thought it was going to go on this military-industrial complex kind of story arc. These new AI super soldiers come into the real world, run amok, and then something from the grid has to come out and stop them. But that was not the case. I also like that Athena and Ares and the security programs that get printed in the real world are vulnerable, even though they have these, fancy light cycles and flying machines and things like that, and they are pretty much invincible. Ares and Athena and the vehicles only last 29 minutes in the real world before disengaging and disintegrating, which was a really cool element. It gives the action scenes more urgency, rather than having a 40-minute chase through downtown wherever it was set. And the programs are aware of that. They have a timer that counts down, so they know they have a finite amount of time to complete the mission before they basically turn into little ashy cubes that disintegrate onto the floor. There was a couple of elements that I was a bit confused on. What I didn't get was how the transfer of Ares and Athena and the programs and vehicles from the grid, how that worked in the real world. The laser 3D printers were cool, but it was a bit of a mystery to how it worked, because 3D printers are pretty much magic to me. I think they are incredible what they can do, but it still remains a bit of a mystery how it works. I mean, I know the basic principle of how it works, but in Tron, it's a bit unclear how these 3D lasers, which there are a few of, make 3D matter. How do they get Ares and Athena, the programs, from the grid, and how do they put them into physical bodies that can walk, talk, and interact? And how do the vehicles move? What powers the bikes and the tanks and the flying machines? That was a bit of a mystery as well. I did like the frames and the scaffolding around the programs when they're made in the real world. That was a really cool, realistic element. But it was a little bit of a mystery how the programs were transferred into 3D printed bodies. How do they look and feel so real? Because Ares looks like he's made out of flesh, which I think the programs are, but that wouldn't make any sense. How could the 3D laser produce flesh and skin? How do they look so real? The other thing I kept thinking about, is this going to be possible in a few years' time? Because it's kind of cool, but it's also kind of scary, because if you had a bad state actor that could just produce a super army that could just be endlessly replaced as long as you got the raw materials to do it, that would be cool, but also frightening. Make a cool James Bond film plot. And this goes back to the orange tree. It's a cool scene, but part of me was thinking, what the fuck? What materials are they using to print it? How did it make real oranges? Shouldn't it be made out of plastic or something? How is it printing wood? How is it alive? How did it produce an orange that he uses in a cocktail? That were some of the questions I had after the film. Is it possible to print a tree? Another element that was a little confusing was the reverse transfer scenes. They were a bit trippy, especially the ones where Kim gets reverse transferred into the grid, and then when she comes out of it, and when Ares goes real. So time to move on to the themes and philosophy of Tron Ares. There's a lot of themes and philosophical anecdotes in this film, mainly regarding AI and digital consciousness. Other films have touched upon this before. The themes and concepts of Tron Ares are at the forefront of a lot of people's fears about AI, just where this technology can go in the future. And another aspect of the film I liked is it doesn't show AI as just purely evil or purely good. It's this balance in between that is being dictated by real people. And that's more where the threat is coming from, is from people, not so much the programs, because the programs are programmed by the people. And this is highlighted perfectly in Ares' character development. He isn't just a villain. He's so much more than just a villain. He's a metaphor for what AI can and could be. He's not really the bad guy, despite being programmed to be the master program security attack dog that he starts off life as. He's a mirror. He's a mirror of his creator's ambitions and his fears to an extent. He needs a aggressive program to do his dirty work for him. He wants that cutting edge technology. He wants his company to have a monopoly on AI, and he's willing to go to extraordinary lengths to undercut the competition. It also brings up the other question about AI and computer programs in general. Are programs alive? Do they feel? Can they feel? And how can we tell the difference? If you have an artificial intelligence program like Ares or Athena, aren't they technically living entities? They're not really beings, but I guess they're still living to a degree. If they're conscious of their programming and their interactions and become aware of consciousness, aren't they technically living? Or at the very least, they know they are separate from a standard computer program or circuitry or something like that. At the very least, they would be aware that there's a possibility that they are alive, or they could be alive. Not so much alive, but they are a sentient, intelligent program. Even if their whole existence is just to do what they are told and to carry out their creator's commands. But by far the most interesting character, and the character that these themes are best emphasized in, is Ares. He's a walking, talking example of the best and worst parts of AI, or what AI could be. Ares, like Athena, is aware of the 29-minute rule, which causes Ares to seek out the permanence code that Kim has found in Flynn's old files. He needs it to get out of the grid, and makes a deal with Kim when she goes into the grid. Scenes like that bring up a really interesting question. If he's conscious enough to the point where he has worked out he needs this permanence code to effectively become a real boy in the real world, so he can quote unquote live outside of the construct of the grid, would that not make him a living entity to some degree? Because he's obviously aware that he is somehow vulnerable or mortal in the real world, given the 29-minute rule. Ares' story arc also makes us question reality. What the fuck is reality? If this program's reality was pretty much this room in this digital grid, and then he becomes conscious of this bigger, wider world because he's been interacting with it. What does it say about reality? What does it say about programming? Is Ares not effectively alive like a normal person would be? And that's what really prompted me to get into this philosophical debate with ChatGPT about AI and art and what it means to be human and alive. It also makes you wonder, could this technology in a program like Ares and Athena exist in 10 to 20 years' time? And does it reflect something that is a little bit too familiar, which is happening in our reality right now? The rise of unchecked AI. There's a lot of corporations and companies that are putting a lot of stock in AI. I don't think it's as good as a lot of people say it is. It is interesting to play around with, but I wouldn't trust it 100% because it does make a lot of mistakes. And these companies that are just using it so they can undercut staff, so they don't have to pay people, so they can make even more money, I think are really putting all their eggs in one basket. A couple of days ago on the news, some company drafted some report that they were proposing to another business or a government sector or something like that, and they used AI to generate the report, and it was so full of mistakes that the other entity picked it up, this company or whatever it was. They picked up all the mistakes and didn't use it, which highlights that if these companies that have all this access to these resources and personnel and can pay somebody to come up with this report, have cut corners so they can save a bit of money and get AI to do it, have really just shot themselves in the foot. Because they're willing to lose a government or business contract because they wanted to save a few bucks by not hiring somebody to do the research and produce the report. And now they just left red-faced without the contract and having to pay somebody to redo the report. Not exactly the smartest business decision. A lot of companies are looking to get rid of call centers and chat services on help desks and replace it with AI. I don't think it's quite there yet. And that is another area that Tron Ares really highlights, is the limits corporations will go to control and monopolize new technology and unchecked tech company power. In the film Dillinger, he wants control over the entire grid, the entire digital world. He wants Encom's data and their research, and these are areas that are all too familiar in the real world. These big tech companies go to war with each other because they want total control over the digital landscape. They want control over people's data, identities, their autonomy. They want to control everything. That bullshit, you got to sign up for this online or you got to give your phone number out. It's also they can go sell it to another third party that sells it to a fourth and a fifth and a sixth party, and then it ends up in a Prince of Nigeria scam somewhere. And that's your information that you gave to a fucking company who told you they had your best interest at heart, but they use your data as a way to make themselves more money. There's a lot of big tech companies around the world that have gone way too unchecked for far too long. Social media companies have got away with a lot of shit. They've been unchecked since their inception. And it's only now in 2025 that the government is starting to restrict what they can and can't do and who they can show their content to. Like their underage users ban that is being implemented around the world. Is it going to work? Is it not? I don't know. I think the cat's out of the bag. I think they needed to restrict it in its first few years. Nearly 15, 20 years down the track, I think it's a bit too fucking late for that. Yeah, it's good to protect the kids from seeing bad shit online, but at the same time, it's like there's ways around it, and now you're just going to make younger people prove that they are the age they say they are, which means you're going to bring out a whole new lot of digital IDs, and just wait till the government gets a hold of that. They're going to want to implement digital ID everywhere. It's already started to be implemented in some places in Australia on a voluntary basis. I don't think it's going to be too big. It's being implemented in England. I plan on doing an episode on that next year. I got to do a deep dive into the research. That is pretty scary, because it seems like one restriction or ban on any of these big new tech companies now seems to just be a Trojan horse to implement more controls and restrictions on people's freedom. And these are freedoms that we had 20-something years ago that all of a sudden are being controlled and slowly eroded away, so we don't notice it over a long period of time. There's themes in Tron Ares that definitely feel eerily relevant to what's happening today. And it obviously parallels today's tech culture that has basically just exploded right in our faces, and it doesn't seem like we can really do much about it. The genie's definitely out of the bottle. But for all the technology and artificial intelligence and the themes of unchecked tech companies, control, and printing artificial intelligent super soldiers, Tron Ares does manage to keep things human. The stakes are high, but they definitely feel real and grounded in a human-driven story, despite most of the film taking place in a digital world. Freedom, choice, morality, these are questions that Tron Ares really does throw at the audience. Ares questions his morality, which leads him to make a choice, which ultimately leads him to seek freedom. These are questions that are relevant to human beings as well as fictionalized computer programs. Despite the theoretical themes and concepts of Tron Ares, there are some really immersive moments in the film as well. Ares' evolution is one of the most interesting arcs in the film. During the first half of the film, Ares is pretty much Dillinger's attack dog, until he starts to question his creator's orders, and he works out that Kim might be able to give him the permanence code and get him out of the grid. It also sets up and makes the second half of the film that much more interesting. And it's about halfway through the film, the stakes have been raised and the entire story has been inverted. The bad guy is now a savior, and the roles have been reversed, which is an element you don't see a lot of in Hollywood blockbusters. I wasn't expecting it. The trailer definitely doesn't lead on that this role reversal might take place, because what I've seen in the trailers, it makes it look like Ares is just the bad guy of the film from start to finish, and when really the real bad guy of the film is Dillinger. Athena takes over as the attack dog. And while Dillinger isn't exactly the best character, he's not the greatest tech psycho to ever grace the screens. He's unlikable, he's not very charismatic, he's a bit of a fucking wanker, he's a tool, pretty much. But he still is an interesting character that might have a bigger part to play. The other characters like Kim and the other tech CEO, Singh, and Kim's partner, Flores, are all very realistic, fleshed out modern characters. However, unlike Tron Legacy, I thought the background grid programs were very impersonal, which might have been the point. There's a lot more of the background programs in Tron Legacy. There's only a handful of these programs in Ares. The grid doesn't seem to be as vastly populated as Legacy's grid. However, I do have some criticisms with Tron Ares, because there are some unrealistic parts of it besides what I've already mentioned. The biggest one focusing on Dillinger. No one tries to shut him down or his company. After the cop car gets cut in half, the police don't decide to pay him a visit, because it's pretty obvious where these light cycles with this red razor blade running behind it cutting cars in half is coming from. I mean, it's not overly obvious, but he's the only there's only several big tech players in town. One of them has demonstrated that they have this technology in the black and red, and that is Dillinger. So the cops don't come knocking on his door asking him some questions. Why is a police cruiser being cut in half? Why have you been causing chaos, riding these light cycles down main streets? Dillinger's definitely a morally questionable character. He doesn't have many ethics. He's void of morality. He doesn't care about hurting people, and he lacks a lot of empathy. And it's interesting that Ares, his creation, calls him out on his bullshit and can see that he's lying. Which is interesting. Imagine that in real life. Could an advanced computer program question its creator? Could it flip the script and question why it's been brought into being? Because there's similar themes to Prometheus and Alien Covenant, especially the start of Alien Covenant when Wayland's explained to David why he created him. There's a couple of themes about creation that are sprinkled in to Tron Ares, and a few similar themes. It also makes you wonder, could this be the future of warfare, this weird digital frontier? I mean, yes, cyber warfare is a thing that's been around for a long time, but imagine if the US Army just started printing tanks and these AI soldiers that once they got struck down on the battlefield, you could just make another one in a couple of minutes. Pretty wild to think about. It also makes you wonder, will computing and artificial intelligence become this advanced? I mean, I personally think a real-life Ares is probably 5 to 10 years away. The program version, not so much the physical form. So Tron Ares definitely upholds the legacy of the Tron franchise. It honors the previous two films. It connects the dots. It brings back some old favorites, but in a new form. We have the new light cycle, the recognizer, the grid, and all the gloriously neon digital landscapes. It was very cool seeing the nostalgic Tron grid on the big screen. And of course, the cameo from Jeff Bridges was also a highlight. Which also makes sense because Kim's got all of Flynn's old floppy disks and all the old files, which is where they discovered the permanence code. Tron Ares honors the previous films that came before it, but it digs a little deeper into the philosophical territory than the previous two films. It's a more personal journey than the previous films. It definitely has its own identity, but it connects all the dots back to Tron Legacy and Tron. So all in all, I really enjoyed Tron Ares. Tron Legacy was a bigger, brighter, bolder, more action-packed film. But I think the more human, personal side of Tron Ares definitely sets it apart from the other two films. It definitely has its own identity. It also is a big-budget action film that blends a lot of various elements. It has a lot to say about the future of AI and computing, but also brings up some very big philosophical themes and concepts. It really makes you think and it really makes you question things, which I really did like. It's not just a brainless action film. Everything seems necessary and like it serves a bigger part of the story. There's not just a light cycle chase down Main Street for the sake of it. It has a point to it. And while that might be true for a lot of films, Tron Ares could have been very ridiculous. They could have had a lot of pointless, nostalgic things in it, but they don't. The nostalgia is definitely dialed back. It's only used in a few sections of the film, one big one in particular, and it just perfectly crosses the T's and dots the I's and links everything back in a coherent timeline. Because it has been a long time between films. And when that much time has passed in between the first, second, and third films, the timelines can get very skewed and can get very out of proportion. And this film does a very good job of keeping everything linear and this progression of the Tron story and the Tron universe. Great visual effects, great acting, great music. The stakes are higher, but they're also more personal in this film. I probably enjoyed Legacy a bit more than Ares. That film pushes the envelope. It's just a absolute balls out digital visual extravaganza. The characters are great, the costumes, the action, the pacing, the directing was great in that film. But as I said, Ares is a fantastic film, and it does really make you question where we're going as human beings and the future of AI and technology, and brings up a whole bunch of philosophical questions about what it means to be human, and definitely goes a lot deeper than the generic sci-fi action film. Another thing I love about the Tron films is Jeff Bridges. I love that whole cool man, realistic, relatable tech bro vibe he has. He's kind of like the prototype for the tech billionaire. And the scene with him and Ares was, one of the standout scenes of the film. That's one I kept thinking about. There's a lot of key themes being thrown around in that scene. It was one of my favorites. But one of the most impactful scenes of the entire film, and this is a big spoiler, so if you are planning on seeing it and you don't want this part spoiled, stop listening now. But one of the big scenes I really kept thinking about after the credits was Ares going good and transitioning into a real person, more or less. And the scene with him in the cafe writing a postcard and then riding off into the sunset in a bike was a really fucking cool way to send off this character. I hope Ares is going to be back, and I hope they do make a Tron 4. But it was a really cool way to take a character that has been pretty much this digital security program and then transition him into this guy that wants to go out and explore the real world and experience what this real world has to offer and essentially just be a real human. He's writing postcards. All the things he does are very nostalgic. He rides an old 80s Ducati, which he mentions in the film. He's got this affinity for 80s culture. He's got this cool leather jacket, very retro way he dresses. And this is from this ultra sophisticated program, and that's why I loved the character of Ares and how Jared Leto portrays him. It's just a really unique twist on a character. You think you have this character figured out in the first part of the movie, and even seeing the trailers, you think you've got this grasp of who and what Ares is, this killing machine bad guy dressed in black and red, jumping through windows on light cycles, but that's just not really the case. And one of the key scenes that gives the audience a few hints that Ares isn't quite what he appears to be is the scene when he's watching the rain and the fireflies. He's watching the rain and he has this childlike wonderment about him. It's those little scenes where he's watching the rain and he's got the firefly on his finger that give a very clear clue to the audience that he is a very inquisitive, very curious character. And the same goes for Athena. There's a scene where a sprinkler system goes off and same thing, she thinks it's rain, which was a very interesting quirk to add to artificial intelligence programs. So I definitely hope there is a Tron 4. I'd really love to see this series continue. I think they're really onto something now, and it'd be great if we didn't have to wait 15 years for another one. Another thing that Tron Ares does really well is it doesn't give the film a specific date that the film takes place in, like Blade Runner in 2018 or 2019 or whatever it was, which will hopefully help to not age the film in future years. The technology in the film is probably, 10 years away in some regards, maybe 15 for the 3D printed stuff. And by not setting a date that the film takes place in means the film won't age. Because a lot of the 80s sci-fi films had to put a specific date to give it a grounded in reality timeline, like Blade Runner. This takes place 40 years in the future, and this is where we think technology is going to go. I mean, it's 2025, and we're getting to the point where hybrids and EVs are more predominant on the roads than conventional petrol engines in some places. We haven't quite got to the flying cars yet, and hopefully we don't, because people have a hard enough time driving on the ground, let alone in the air. But maybe Tron Ares' biggest strengths are the philosophical reflections on artificial intelligence, digital identity, and societal control. I mean, it made me question a lot of things and really got me thinking. What does it say about the future of humans and us as a society, and a future where AI is pretty much everywhere? But one thing I haven't mentioned about the film yet is the music. Music has always played a large part in the Tron films. Tron Legacy's soundtrack by Daft Punk was one of the best modern soundtracks. Still is, in my opinion. The way the sound matched the visuals and created this techno, nostalgic, yet futuristic soundscape to match the visuals was nothing short of genius. And this time around in Tron Ares, Nine Inch Nails does the soundtrack. I love the title song, As Alive As You Need Me to Be. I was a little disappointed that you don't get to hear the entire song played out in the credits. It kind of cuts out half the song, and I had the cinema that had the really good surround sound, so I was hoping to fucking hear that blasting through the speakers in the cinema, but it kind of cuts out a quarter of the song, and it wasn't quite the same, because I think the start of that song is fucking fantastic. Nine Inch Nails' soundtrack is great. It's not quite as good as Daft Punk, but it definitely has a technological, nostalgic, retro, sci-fi vibe with sinister Nine Inch Nails sound to it. Very, very cool. It definitely suits the film. It definitely suits the Tron franchise. I might have to get this soundtrack. I did buy the Tron Legacy soundtrack, so if I can find a copy of the CD, I might have to get it. And as I mentioned, the Daft Punk soundtrack blew me away when I saw it. The opening theme, The Grid, with Jeff Bridges' narration over the top of it, was the perfect way to kickstart Tron Legacy. It was also the perfect way to reboot a franchise that hadn't been seen in decades. It was big, bold, loud, and just suited the film perfectly. The nightclub song fight was fucking great. Solar Sailor, that was another really cool track from that soundtrack. The Grid, and the final song, I can't remember what it was called. So all in all, Tron Ares is a visual feast for the senses. The performances are great, the pacing's great. It makes you question a lot of things. It has a very philosophical take on technology and the future of AI. It covers some pretty current topics. It's personal, futuristic, action-packed, makes you think, but at its core, it is a human story in a technologically saturated landscape. It wasn't what I was expecting from the trailers, but I'm glad it wasn't, because it was so much more than what the trailer makes it out to be. It's deeply immersive, thought-provoking, and in some places emotional. Tron Ares takes us back to an evolved grid. It expands the world and the characters. It also makes you think and question things along the way. I always appreciate films that make you work it out as you're watching it and really make you think about things after the film's finished. So all in all, I really enjoyed Tron Ares. I'd give it 4 out of 5 stars. Probably 3 out of 5 stars if it didn't have the Nine Inch Nails soundtrack. I think that's a huge part of that film is the music. Definitely see it on the big screen if you can. And I really hope they make a Tron 4, and a Tron 5, and a Tron 6. The world definitely needs more Tron films. I just hope it's not going to be another 15-year wait. And that brings us to the end of the review and the end of the show. A big thank you to everyone who listened to the end. If you'd like to support The True Tank, there's a couple of things you can do. Head on over to the Facebook and Instagram page, give them a follow and a like. You can download and listen to your favourite episodes of The True Tank on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Audible, YouTube, Pandora, Castbox, or wherever else you get podcasts from. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell anyone you think might like the show, help spread it around and get The True Tank out there. If you're enjoying the show, you can leave a 5-star rating and review on your preferred podcast platform. Every review helps the show grow and get found. And as I mentioned in the opening, I did a deep philosophical dive into AI with ChatGPT, which I'll be recording very soon, which is kind of like a spin-off of the film review in a weird way. So definitely look out for that. That should be out in the next week to 2 weeks. We're going to be looking at a lot of in-depth philosophical themes on that show, so prepare yourself. And that is the end of the show. Big thank you to everyone who listened to the end. And as always, I'm the Tank. This is the truth. Truth to tell.